Giuseppe Joe Zerilli, 1897 to 1977, was a prominent figure in organized crime in the United States, known for being one of the founding leaders of the Detroit Mafia, also known as the Detroit Partnership. His life and criminal career spanned several decades, during which he became a highly influential figure in the underworld. Below is a detailed account of Zerilli's life, involvement in organized crime, and his influence across various American cities, including key events and deaths attributed to his network. Early life and immigration. Giuseppe Zerilli was born in Sicily, Italy, in 1897. Like many Sicilians at the time, Zerilli immigrated to the United States in the early 20th century, arriving in Detroit, Michigan, in 1914. Detroit was a significant city for immigrants, with many Italians settling there, bringing their culture and, in some cases, criminal organizations. Zerilli was one of these Sicilians who would soon become involved in the burgeoning world of organized crime. Rise to power in Detroit. Zerilli began his career as a bootlegger during the Prohibition era, which began in 1920. He became associated with other Sicilian mobsters who were heavily involved in the illegal distribution of alcohol. Prohibition provided a massive financial opportunity for criminals, and Zerilli, alongside others like his cousin Angelo Melli, used the period to build the foundation of what would become the Detroit Partnership. In 1931, Zerilli and his associates attended the Atlantic City Conference, where many of the nation's top crime figures gathered. It was at this conference that the modern American Mafia was formalized, and Zerilli was recognized as a key player in Detroit's Mafia family. Detroit Mafia leadership. After the fall of Gaspar Milazzo, a Detroit mobster who was killed during the Mafia Wars of the 1930s, Zerilli took control of the Detroit Mafia. Under his leadership, the Detroit Partnership became a well-organized and efficient crime syndicate, focusing on a variety of rackets, including gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and labor racketeering. Zerilli ran the Detroit Mafia with a strong hand, ensuring that the organization maintained its power and influence in the city while avoiding the public attention that other mob families in cities like New York and Chicago attracted. Key murders and mob wars. Throughout Zerilli's reign, the Detroit Mafia was involved in several high-profile murders, though Zerilli himself kept a low profile and avoided being directly implicated in many of these crimes. The death of Gaspar Milazzo was one of the key turning points that allowed Zerilli to ascend to leadership. Milazzo, who was the head of the Detroit Mafia before Zerilli, was assassinated in 1930 by rival mobsters during a power struggle. The Detroit Mafia was also involved in various mob wars throughout the 20th century, but Zerilli maintained control of the organization by avoiding internal conflicts and maintaining alliances with other crime families across the country. Zerilli was also linked to the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, the infamous Teamsters leader who vanished in 1975. Though never formally charged or proven, the Detroit Mafia, under Zerilli's leadership, was suspected of playing a role in Hoffa's disappearance due to Hoffa's involvement in organized crime and labor unions. Expanding influence in other cities. While Zerilli's primary base of operations was in Detroit, his influence extended beyond the city. The Detroit Mafia had strong ties with other organized crime families, including those in New York, Chicago, and Las Vegas. Las Vegas. The Detroit Mafia, under Zerilli, had interests in the burgeoning casino industry in Las Vegas during the mid-20th century. Alongside other mafia families, the Detroit mob took part in the skimming operations at several casinos, which allowed them to siphon money from the casinos without paying taxes. The profits from Las Vegas helped fund the Detroit Mafia's operations back in Michigan. New York and Chicago. Zerilli maintained close ties with the mafia families in New York, particularly the Genovese and Gambino families. He was involved in various national mafia conferences and alliances, helping to broker peace and cooperation between different crime families. The Detroit Mafia was also allied with the Chicago outfit, which helped facilitate their involvement in the Midwest's criminal enterprises. Imprisonment and later life. In 1950, Zerilli was sentenced to prison for tax evasion, a common charge used by law enforcement to target mafia leaders at the time. However, he served only a few years in prison and returned to his position as head of the Detroit Mafia upon his release. Zerilli was known for being cautious and intelligent, avoiding the flamboyant behavior that brought down many other mafia bosses. He managed to maintain control of the Detroit Mafia well into the 1970s. His cautious nature allowed him to avoid many of the violent struggles that characterized other mafia families, and he was able to remain in power for over 4 decades. Death and legacy. Joe Zerilli died of natural causes on October 30, 1977, in Grosse Pointe Park, Michigan, at the age of 80. His death marked the end of an era for the Detroit Mafia. Zerilli was succeeded by his son, Jack William Tocco, who would continue to lead the Detroit Mafia well into the 1990s. Zerilli's legacy is one of calculated leadership and quiet influence. He was one of the few mafia bosses to die of natural causes after a long reign in organized crime. His ability to keep a low profile and avoid the violent outbursts that plagued other crime families ensured that the Detroit Mafia remained a powerful force in the criminal underworld for decades. Documentary appearances and discussions. In various documentaries about the Mafia in America, Zerilli is often portrayed as a quiet yet powerful figure in organized crime. His name frequently comes up in discussions about the Detroit Mafia's influence and the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Documentaries such as The Mafia in Detroit and The Hoffa Files discuss Zerilli's role in shaping the criminal landscape of Detroit and his involvement with national mafia figures. Many commentators and historians of organized crime view Zerilli as a significant but often overlooked figure compared to more flamboyant bosses like Al Capone or John Gotti. However, Zerilli's discretion and intelligence allowed him to avoid the fate that befell many of his peers in other cities, and his leadership style ensured the longevity of the Detroit Mafia. In these documentaries, interviews with law enforcement officials, mafia historians, and even some former mobsters paint a picture of Zerilli as a disciplined, business-minded leader who preferred to avoid unnecessary violence. Thanks for tuning into Sika True Crime Docs. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating tales. Your support helps us keep bringing these stories to life. See you in the next episode.